I read this book, Experts of Our Potential, and at one point I wondered, did you used to be my coach and are you talking about me? Like, or did you call my coach and they gave you a whole file on me? Like, what is going on here? Tell us a little bit about where you were before we even delve in. Tell me about where you were in your life at the time that you were writing this.
Yeah, so two things. One, that response is my favorite response because that is the response I was hoping for from anybody reading it, right?
Mm,
Is that like, and it's based off how I was taught to speak and like on stage, specifically the storytelling part of speaking on stage. And there's very simply the idea that like if you're telling your story on the stage and it's catharsis for you, you're not ready to tell that story on stage, right? But
mm,
if you're telling the story, if you've processed your story, right, to where you're comfortable with it, then your job is to tell the story so the other people see themselves in that story, right?
yeah.
And so that was like, so you saying that just made my entire day because that was really how we tried to, really how I tried to write it, and with the editor friend of mine who kind of pushed me into that style, which was a little like, Fight Club-esque, I guess. But that yeah, I wrote that a little bit the year before I did the TED Talk, and I had I was working, as a contract facilitator for Centis and neuroleadership, and yeah, it it sort of described the like it was really in some ways the book was, I processed this kind of period of my life relative to, these things I was learning and teaching. And I've just always been a believer that like we don't need advice, we need story. And so I tried to feel like how can I use that my story to then help people, reflect as opposed to here's what you should do, here's how you should do it, because that just never it's not my style, and I don't know if I could ever complete a book like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit, what you reveal to yourself through the writing of this book. And we'll talk about that at the end. But this process of allowing this emergent wisdom to be born for our clients, and so for those who are meeting Brian for the first time, you may have seen him more recently on one of our Unlearning episodes where we were talking about the manosphere, an absolutely amazing episode. I encourage you all to go and watch that. Dr. Neil is on that, who's also been several times guest on Unlearning. But, really in this book, Experts of Our Potential, I feel as though it's so timely because in talking about the manosphere and talking about what is going on in our larger society as we see this move the world over towards authoritarianism more and more, there is a sense that many people, and especially men, are struggling with a story of what they were meant to be, what they were meant to know, how they were meant to achieve. And that is not the world that they exist in anymore. I just want
Mhm.
to read one of the first quotes that really jumped up and bit me in my ass while we were reading. You said, he hangs his head to the side and looks doubtful. I guess I don't know what good it will do. I suppose if nothing else, I could at least have you help me with my resume. That was all I needed, a breather, a little time to catch my own breath and figure out what was going on. Had it been just Chris going through this turmoil, I would have doubled down on our strategies and helped him find the next position. But something was changing in the market. something I had seen in too many clients, and I needed some time to figure out. In order to help my clients gain a sense of control, I would have to consider challenging my own strategies and testing my own assumptions. In this business, I've learned a simple truth: fate is imagination made real when a person believes the prophecy formed in their nightmares. I'm going to read that again. You didn't catch it. In this, well, you wrote it, but for you at
Sorry.
home, you didn't catch it. In this business, I've learned a simple truth: fate is imagination made real when a person believes the prophecy formed in their nightmares. Brian, set up what's going on at this point. So you had this client for a few years. He's come to you, and what's happening?
Yeah, I think the same thing that like all of us have experienced in one point of time. It's when the things we rely on for certainty, a job, our profession, or even our relationship, like kind of shatters, right? Like gets taken from us. Like we get this moment that we realize we've been putting our control in something we have no control over,
Mm,
and in that moment, like there's a choice to some degree, right? And the choice can be really stark for people. And I think for me, it it there's there's a choice of like really scrambling for control. And I
yeah.
and that's and I've seen in that choice can lead to really bad places, right? I think. And the other choice is like surrender, for lack of a better term, right? That like that and I why I wanted to write the book in the way I did, but also what I've known some of the most profound and valuable moments in my own coaching is the surrender myself as a coach. That that if I try to force, a direction or a path, or versus if I surrender to the curiosity, which is more how I just describe it today, then we can create something new that we don't that has not that we've not seen before. But that second path, that the curiosity path, is scary, right?
Mm. In the book, the protagonist slash a very real person is Chris. Why does
Mm-hmm.
it seem as though there are more and more Chris's appearing every day? This person who's made it to this mid level in their career, they had an assumption that they were on the correct trajectory to be really at the top of their career. All of the, vision boards, all of
Mm-hmm.
work that they had done for 10, 15 years to move up the ladder now suddenly comes crashing down. And they are sitting on the couch opposite from you,
Mm-hmm.
feeling like a failure.
Mm-hmm.
Why does it seem as though there are more and more people at this phase?
Yeah, because and I address it a little bit in that book, but I think it's more real today than it was even, 7 years ago when I wrote that book. And it's this social contracts, implicit or explicit, are breaking down faster and faster.
Explain what a social
Yeah,
contract is.
yeah. So for me, growing up, and I'm kind of on that Gen X line, if you will, it was beaten to my head, like go to school, work hard, get an education, and if you just work hard and if you go and like things will be taken care of, and or get into this industry and you'll have in. And I explain it like in my father's generation, it was, he was a miner, right? At least when I was a little kid, and then he became a truck driver. But the social contract was torn for him a couple of times. It was be a union miner, put up with some garbage, right? You're going to do hard work. You're going to be, but 30 years later, you can retire and it's going to be okay. Or get your own, and then, but for him, he did that, and then the mine shut down. and he
Mm,
had to uproot his whole life. And then he became a truck driver, get your own business, and you'll be taken care of. And that didn't ultimately pan out for him either. And the same with me, like go to school, do these things, and then that dream, right, that idea isn't there. And we see it in the corporate world. Like you're actually to your disadvantage to stay in a job longer than 3 years. If you're a
mm,
professional, like you're negatively affecting your income every year after 3 years in the majority of companies. And we also, we just went through this. I've had multiple clients that I've actually been working with pro bono that were just laid off from the federal government. The place where that social contract was maybe the strongest,
mm,
go through this like pretty painful process of becoming a federal employee, like go through the hard work that it requires to be in these places that is often unthankful work. And oh, now we come in and we just, without any warning, without really any explanation, and like overlaid with this "you're a piece of crap" message, which is not me making it up, like that literally those things were said in the emails. And now what that does to us is create this like sense of uncertainty that our brain, how we used to explain it in neuroscience, a known bad, or rather an unknown bad in your brain. Uncertainty is 10 times more negatively impactful on your brain than a known bad.
mm,
And so
mm.
when we're in this heavy uncertainty, and now you throw AI on top of that, now you throw, these just this, there isn't that, like there are so few places where we can find that if I do this, then I get this, and this will come out. Yeah, and we've been sort of like convinced, people convincing us that that's okay, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and it's not. Yeah.
I was listening to someone else's podcast. I think it was Malcolm Gladwell, on the drive. I'm doing this 2 hour drive to rehearsal every night because our play opens this evening.
Hmm.
You here to go like collect my stuff and head to opening night. And they were having a debate about the good or bad of Paw Patrol. And
Mm.
if you have, two children who were in the past, 10 years between the ages of 0 and 10, you know what Paw Patrol is. Um, and one of the things another, neuroscientist was talking about is that the problem with a show like Paw Patrol is that it sets up a problem that is then quickly solved. And that
Mm.
happens every single episode. Is there an element that not only are we watching our, these expectations we had for society, these expectations that we had of the social construct, but then also we have been conditioned more and more to believe that if there's a problem, I will just always be able to solve it in a neat and
Hmm.
tidy bow.
Right. I think that it's this interesting balance, right? Like, I think that I think there's a benefit in knowing that that's possible, right? Like, so the more I see that picture that it can be solved, the more I believe it, which will then lead me to continue working when the problem is there. And then also knowing it can't be solved is a benefit. And this is like broadly where they become these like two disparate camps of external locus of control and internal locus of control, right? External is like my life is a product of things outside of me, and then internal is my life is a product of how I'm responding to it. The reality is both of those are true.
Mm,
And and the challenge is for the individual, I have to believe that my life is a product of my response to the stimuli, right? I have to believe that because the less I believe that, the less I stay motivated when it gets hard. At the same time, the reality is doesn't matter how much influence you try to produce. Like your environmental circumstances are numerically going to limit those chances.
Yeah.
And what's presented often is one or the other. And I think that the reality of both of these competing factors is just really hard to communicate, if you will, right?
Mm,
That like, yes, like you have to maintain this belief that you can have an impact on it, and you have to honestly confront the external realities, which is that's a James Stockdale paradox of as a POW is that you have to maintain the belief that you will, right, that you will, in his case, that you will get out, that you will eventually succeed.
hmm.
You have to remove any control over when or how or why, right? You have to face the brutal realities and not lose faith in your ability. And that is extremely hard work for humans.
Yes. Let me ask the question because it's not revealed, or if it is, I didn't read it. But Chris is white, is a white man.
Chris is me.
Chris is you.
Yeah. So
Do I
it's
need to read that book
subtle.
again?
Yeah, it's
What? You
subtle.
didn't reveal that. Nobody at home, you didn't hear that.
Yeah. Well,
This is a
it's not.
spoiler.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. It is a spoiler, but it's not, right? Like, I mean, I played
Oh
with
my God,
on.
Brian, I can't talk to you. I need to go like rethink everything in the book. What?
I knew I could feel it in the beginning as you were asking the question, and I was like, "Oh, I want to tell him because I want to see the reaction."
So
Yeah,
the answer is yes, he is in fact a white man.
yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Chris,
So
you.
yes, so the dynamic there is what the dynamic I was playing with, and I got some pushback on it a little bit, not from my editor, but from others. The coach is me also, and the reason I wanted to write it that way is like the our experience of life is like, the two on the shoulder, like the one saying what we should do and then the one saying what the other piece of that is sort of hidden in there is that coach voice isn't always our own, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the voices we picked up on the way. It's the advice we get on the way. It's the conversations we have with others. And distinguishing that external voice from the internal voice is much harder than any of us, right, really actually, articulate, if you will,
Yeah.
or confront. That like is that self-doubt my voice? Is it someone else's voice? Because it sure sounds like my voice,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
and is the good advice my voice or somebody else's voice? Because it sure sounds like mine. And what we know now in the science of connection is that actually are very, like the idea of like self-awareness, self-concept is actually a community construct. Like we
Yeah.
create it in community. And so that was the having that, like really playing with that duality, right? Because that's the duality that's also happening with our clients,
Mm-hmm.
is that we are processing at the same time they are, and how we respond to them, right, is the same way we respond to ourselves. If we can't respond to ourselves with empathy, with curiosity and surrender, we're probably not doing that with our clients.
Yes. Wow. I mean, uh, so many things. The reason I asked if wanted to clarify if Chris slash Brian was a white man is that while there were so many things that were similar, what was different in my own experience is um, this belief that the world up until this point has your back. I think is very
Mm,
different as a woman and then as a Black woman, right? Because
yeah.
some of the skills that Chris slash you are working to develop, you're adultified at a much younger age,
Mm,
depending on the amount of target identities that you have, right? And so
mm-hmm.
near the middle of the book, some of the things that I see him struggling with, I'm going, welcome to, the
Right.
experience for everybody else in the world.
Yeah.
you know Oftentimes in literature, in real life with our clients, friends of mine who do this work and also have various target identities will joke so as not to cry, right? Like, are we jealous,
Mm.
or are we happy that they're having that, right? It's it's not an experience that you want for your enemy
Hmm.
either, right? I don't want
Mm.
it for myself, nor do I want it for my enemy. And so, in our kind of larger political, socio-political environment right now, you're seeing a lot of this, like, well, you fucked around and found out energy out
Hmm.
there. But I think a lot of people miss the underlying message there, which is it's not a you fucked around and found out and now, yay, we all get to be oppressed. It's you fucked
Hmm.
around and found out. Now let's collectively move forward
Yeah.
together. And so it was just something that, as I was reading, I was wondering how this moment, did you find that in going through this type of catharsis that you felt more connected to more people, or did it make you want to retreat into yourself more? I'm the only one
Yeah.
who's struggling in this way.
Yeah. Well, and I think broadly for myself, but I think like we insulate here because
Mm,
we think something's wrong with us. We think there's like we talk about this a lot in our work in connection. Like the first sign of disconnection is I'm the only one like this, or there's something wrong with me, right? And because of that, I can't share, and because I can't share, like now here's a spiral, right? And I think for me, and I think some of the things I found out after the book was when we, maybe the term is like high, when we do take that insularly, we don't necessarily know that we're doing it,
mm,
right? One of the statistics on loneliness is if there's 10 people lonely, only two will identify as lonely. And on in one hand, we can look at that and say, well, that's either, that is a, like, are they comfortable saying that? And I actually think we come to experience these like feelings as normal. This is just how everybody feels, right?
mm,
And so being insular in those moments wasn't actually about like avoiding other people. It was actually about like diving into the mask a little deeper, right? Like showing, acting as though I had it figured out, right? And some of them, maybe if I even think about it in the book was, part of writing the book is like helping myself feel like I have it figured out, right? And
mm.
and I think there's levels of like, okay, I'm more comfortable with this, I've processed this, but if I look back at it 10 years, like it's the unfiguring it out that is where the freedom actually is, right?
Yeah.
Because I can know things, but the less I feel like the things I know are absolute, the more open I am to curiosity.
Mm,
And if I'm not curious about other people, connection isn't there. And I think that the thing that we fall into, that I was trying to explore in the book, and that I didn't maybe even understand how deeply we could go with it, is um like that idea of being curious, right? Like really opens you up to, you know, that this is a better way of saying it. The certainty that I had lost isn't replaced with certainty. It's replaced by that surrender,
mm.
if we allow it. Because in that surrender, we can have that connection. We can open the door to learning from anybody we're interacting with. Like, we don't have to feel like we're performing. We don't have to feel like we're having the answers, or have to have the answers, or have the direction. And the more we let that go, the more we understand, oh, everybody's dealing with this. And so that allows us to feel less disconnected and isolated. And if everybody's dealing with this, then we all have different answers. So again, now that there's a comfort in that I think is it's hard for me sometimes to communicate, but I think it's what I found is that same curiosity that I sort of had applied to myself, the more I apply it to other people, the more I find, there is certainty even in the midst of, like a lot of unknowns.
Yeah. I hear you saying, I can't find the words for it, but I want you to speak more on surrender because I think a lot of people have a sense of, I think of some of my family in Lynchburg, Virginia, where surrender is equated with I give it to God and I sit on my ass
Mm-hmm.
and do nothing, right? Somehow
Mm-hmm.
it's going to just show up on my front door. Really,
Yeah.
what do you mean by surrender? Does that mean I just sit here and, it's going to work itself out? What is surrender?
Yeah, I think it's the difference between like forcing something and allowing something. But
Mm,
allowing something isn't sitting back. It's I spend a fair amount of time every year on a river, right? And what you know about like being on a river, especially like class fours and that is like doesn't matter what you want to do, the river's going to go where the river goes, right? And you can spend a whole lot of time fighting the river upstream, obviously, but even like downstream, if you don't, if there's being really good at the river is listening, right? Is understanding. It's seeing like the repetition of the experience, and it's also like leaning on the experiences of those around you. And as you're on the river, you're relying on other people's viewpoints, right? You're how other people are looking because the river can change any moment. Like some of the most risky stuff is once you've done a river enough times, you start to believe this is going to be here and this is going to be there, and you stop listening. So for me, surrender is about like that innate curiosity to listen and put myself into the current that that is actually going to be, if you will, the most, if you will, productive, right? That there are these sort of natural currents that we've all experienced, and and surrender is about like continually finding that current as opposed to trying to create it or trying to fight
mm,
it or trying to go upstream, right?
mm.
It requires a ton of work. It requires just as much work. The difference is the work is sustainable.
Yeah. I know this is going to be completely surprising to you and definitely our producer, Jay, who's listening in the background. But um, some people might say that I have just mild control issues. I don't know why Jay's laughing. Why are you laughing? Um, but it's been interesting, with each passing year as I understand the nuance in it, because I would say I'm not a type A person, by
Hmm.
right, especially if you everybody on this view looks very clean and organized, but what's
Hmm.
right over here, I am not a type A person. But I've been peeling back the onion, looking at the ways that I try to control certain aspects of my life, certain ways
Hmm.
that things will unfold. And my friend, Sarah Johnson, we met juniors in college. So I was probably 17 at the time, right? So we've been friends for 25 years. Is that how math works, right? And I was saying to her on the phone a few weeks ago something about, how I'm not a controlling person. And when I tell you the laugh that came up out of her
Hmm.
was I was offended by the the depth of the laugh and
Hmm.
how long it lasted
Yeah.
and the tears that streamed down her cheeks. And I said, you think I'm controlling? And she's like, Lindsay, You it's not that you are trying to control people, but you want to control the narrative.
Mhm.
And that was something that I saw here and what you're writing here as well, right? Even when I'm going through something, when I'm struggling, when I feel as though failure might be imminent in a certain situation, that's when I'll disappear, right?
Mhm.
I don't want anybody to see me struggle. And
Mhm.
then I'll come back to share the lesson that I learned.
Mhm.
And she said, I've known you for 25 years. And one of the things that I wish for in our friendship is that you will let me be with you in the struggle.
Mhm.
And this was mind boggling to me. What do you mean you want to see me at my worst? And she's like,
Yeah.
the love of a friend of 25 years, I think entitles me to see you at your
Mhm.
shitty moments.
Yeah.
I think so many of us struggle with this idea that people would want to see us when we
Yeah.
don't have it all figured out,
Mhm.
when we're not
Yeah.
glossy and sparkly. And I felt that was something here that you also were working through.
Can I ask you about what you just shared to
Yes,
maybe like see it through a different lens?
yes.
Yeah, because it doesn't sound like control to me. What we often talk about when we're helping people design questions for clarity, right? To help somebody see is when we're doing that in strengths. Like the number one thing we say is like the thing that comes easiest to the person is the thing that they discount the most. Right?
Mm.
They like most people's biggest strengths, they almost can't see. And I heard it in yours, and I just want to explore this. Like, I want to just ask you it this way. How hard is it, or yeah, how easy is it for you to believe in yourself?
Oh, um, the first thing that bubbles up is to say it depends,
Mhm. How easy
right?
is it for you to believe in others?
Extremely easy, right?
Yeah, tell me about that. Why?
Yes, I mean that I would call that my superpower, right? I meet
Yeah.
somebody and immediately I love hearing what people want to do, and then I'm like, here's the five things, here's the five people I know, blah blah blah. How do we get you there? The shortest path
Hmm.
to make it happen, and that's what gets me up in the morning.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm gonna imagine you actually see some of your actions or the majority of your actions through the lens of like whether it's conscious or not, how would this allow someone to help believe in themselves?
Yes.
Because that's why your room is clean, but outside the camera it's not. Because
Yes.
and so if that so instead of control, that is like this thing that has to come out of you coming out, right?
Mm, mm,
It's this thing that like you were given, right? Given, developed, received, whichever. Like it's this thing that you have that others don't. Because I can walk in any coffee shop and find the majority of people that I would ask like how easy is it to believe in others, and they're like not at all. Actually, they're like super hard, or I you know what I mean? Like that what comes easy and natural to you is showing up as control, but it's actually what it sounds like to me is actually this I believe in you so much that I can stay here even though it's hard for you, right? That like I can stay up here and push you a little further than you think you need to be pushed or that you can be pushed, right? With confidence, with a calmness that is going to almost be unnerving to you, and
mm,
that's why it feels like control.
mm. Brian, you're breaking down all of my relationship.
Yeah, yeah. But I
Yeah.
but I wonder if looking at it through that lens is would allow it to sit in the unknown with your friend.
Hmm.
That like if the thing you do the best is believe in them, that we can sit in this unknown and my belief in you and me, wherever this goes, we can pull back and rely on whenever we can. That's the ripcord we can pull on the parachute whenever we want.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're because I find it deeply uncomfortable when
Hmm.
I share about my, like, I'm working on this, or when people give me praise, right? Like,
Hmm.
when people walk up to me and bless you, all
Yeah.
you do it after any live appearance that I make, and people come and give praise. And somebody once told me that I needed to stop responding the way I did, which was like,
Hmm.
oh no, because I was throwing away people's love. And so now
Yeah.
I have trained my body to stay still.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And now I'm going to make it really uncomfortable for you, and I'm not
too
even
late,
asking.
too late.
Like, yeah. So when that happens, what if you responded the way you would want your client to respond? What if you were responding the way you want the person to believe in themselves to respond? What if
Mm,
actually in your response to praise, in your response to that, was actually you setting the example for others to follow by specifically by leaning into that discomfort of owning, right, your own stance, right, or owning
mm.
that thanks that the whatever they're giving you in a humble way.
Yes, I can do that, Dr. Fretwell. Okay. Look,
And to your
I,
initial question, like myself in the book, same thing. Like I think that the presenting it that way was and really the thing that again there's so much overlap for me is like I've learned that it's in sharing like here's a reality that I give others permission to do the same.
yes.
Yeah. And it like and it's not fun like we have talked about what happened to my dad or other really like it's not fun. I don't enjoy it. I don't sign, but also it's where the work is, right?
Mm,
And
hmm.
like and like there's nothing I can say that is going to be more powerful than leading by example.
Yes, yes. In your uh I don't want to call them workshops because I think they're more than
Sure.
workshop experiences that you curate now. And I think even in this moment, we've uh, shown instead of
Mhm.
told what
Yeah.
those experiences are like.
Mhm.
A lot of what you are leading people towards is the experience of being in community, of connection.
Mhm.
Why is that important?
It's not important. It's the most important. We can't
Mm,
survive without it. Like
mm,
it's so ingrained in our biology. It's more important than food or water. We just don't. I think we don't understand it. And inherently, like, or at the I don't want to say surface level, but in my life experience, it's how I lost my dad. It's how I've lost multiple other people to suicide. Right. Um, but but sometimes I even talk about my dad's suicide as a way of hiding my own battle with loneliness that has been part of almost my entire life's experience. And some of that started with abuse at a young age. Some of that started with being in communities, environments that I never fit in. Some of it is my neurodiversity, but it was to some degree until writing that book that I started being like really leaning into who the hell am I?
mm,
And well, I was in initially in that book really focus on these questions that help us discover that what I discover more and more is that that answer is in other people, that we
yeah.
can't answer that question ourselves, and we're not designed to, we're not supposed to. And one of the things that one of the terms we use all the time that once you experience it more is understand it's like our job is to find ourselves in other people's stories. Because
Mhm.
just like this story you just shared about control, that it's actually believed, like, oh, like my story becomes easier to accept and
Mm.
easier to be okay with, and most importantly, easier to actually go and impact the world with, right? And I like that idea of finding ourselves in the other story, in each other's story, that knowing that like the person who's gone through something horrible, right? if if getting them to share how they got through it, what they did, like what they're proud about, what where they found meaning in things like that, not tell us how to, but tell us how they did, right? Those are the things that really help us see ourselves differently. And the
Yeah.
more we see that available in other people, the more we sort of realize one of the concepts that I deeply believe is that loneliness isn't real.
Mm.
It's actually our brain's defensive response to keep us from seeing the reality that we're all connected, that the experiences
Mm.
of love and of care and of overcoming challenges, of hope, of sorrow, of happiness are shared throughout humanity.
Yeah.
And that fight or flight that happens with disconnection from rejection, from isolation, from these experiences is just us. It blinds us to the reality that we cannot be alone. It's an impossibility.
That's a big, you just dropped a big idea here, which I'm sure, there are several scientists who would jump on you and say, of course, loneliness exists, blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
But are you saying that loneliness is, it's not the underlying feeling, it's the output, right? Like
Yeah, the impact, the feeling of loneliness absolutely exists. The impact that can have on your mortality, on your health, mental and physical, absolutely real. But it's real because our brain is buys into a myth,
mm,
right? The
mm,
myth is that you and I don't have something in common, and it's not even in common. It's that you and it's not like in common, like we like the same theater or sports group or whatever. It's we have similar human experiences that may show up completely different, but if we're able to find the like the marrow in that experience, we begin to discover that like there is no you and me, there is, right? Like that there's overlap in all of our
yes,
stories. And
yes.
that's back to the book. That's the Chris coach situation. It's like we don't, when we step back and look at that, like my story and all the stories around me are here. Like I can't separate what is mine versus, right, this the what has shaped me, if you will.
Mm, mm. How does existing in a society that, I mean, at every level preaches hyper individualism, how is that every day exacerbating the problem, right? Like we love the individual hero story. I
Mm-hmm.
look at these coaching, things on Instagram or whatever, revealing my age based on which social media I use, right? That is, you don't need a relationship. You're
Mm-hmm.
failing at your self-care if you want to be with people, right? Like we
Mm-hmm.
have all of these stories swirling around that seem to be confusing people, that
Mm-hmm.
you should be able to operate just by yourself, and that makes you healthy.
Yeah, what's interesting about all of those messages is you'll be hard pressed, and I not just hard pressed. It's impossible to find one that doesn't say, and if you want to learn how, read my book.
Yes.
So they're saying you
I,
can do it on your own. You just need me to help you.
yes.
Right. And the thing, and what they miss is like, yes, we need each other to help each other so that we can do it alone. If right, like, because ultimately we make the choice by ourselves. We handle the problem right, by ourselves. but like we never do it alone. And
Mm.
like you just like you can't, you know, like we do it with the feedback of others that we asked or not. We do it with the story, you know what I mean? We do it because the person we're with is making it easier or harder, like, but we don't do it alone.
Yeah.
And and when, you know, that person comes out and says, you know, like I always laugh, like self-validation. It's like that's great. It won't get you there.
Right.
And you can't build that strength by yourself. Because even to be able to self-validate, you need an environment with external stimuli to even understand if you built it.
Hmm. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because if you're just by yourself, self-validation is just, you know what I mean? Like without getting too philosophical on it, like it's
Please
not,
do.
yeah, it's not as much of, for me, it's not as much of a belief system as it's actually just the reality of like humanity and the world, right? The tree doesn't exist by itself, right?
Mm. Well, it's definitely not trees, right? But
Right.
I think there's an element, and I've got a group of friends who we all got divorced at a similar time, and it's a extremely diverse group in terms of
Mm-hmm.
genders, in terms of sexuality, in terms of ethnicity, blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my mother's here visiting, and she's always joking. She's like, every time I come to your house, it's like coming to a UN meeting, and I'm like, that just happens to be the life that I want to build, right? I don't.
Yeah.
I I want the garden. Um,
Mm.
and one of the things that one of our friends, in coming, he's maybe one of the more recent additions to the group. He comes and he says, I get so much affirmation from this group that has
Mm.
gotten me through this journey. And he goes, but it's always chased with accountability.
Mm.
And and we can laugh about it, but he's being vulnerable and saying, I've never been held accountable at this level before, right? So, and sometimes that means that the affirmation is like, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and
Mm-hmm.
stop being a fucking baby and get back out there, dude, right? We love you, we got you, and
Mm-hmm.
you are totally being immature in this situation. Go,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so there's something in there that I think that I see my clients and potentially even myself sometimes. And we joke about this growing up in Black families because you get this level of nurture and support, but also
Mm-hmm.
this level of accountability. Nobody's going to tell
Yeah.
you that you're the one that fucked up the situation more than a Black mom.
Yeah.
And I think that there's something too where why we can be so desperate for connection, but we don't
Mm-hmm.
want the other part of connection, which is accountability.
Yeah. And what you just described is we talk about that like jealousy and hope, but like what you described is, and I've just, so what you just described is what allows accountability. And it's the belief, right? It's not the like, get your shit together and do this. Because that message delivered by somebody that doesn't know you and believe in you is
Mm.
just abuse, quite
Yes,
honestly, right? Like
yes.
it's just, you know, because it's not tied to what's unspoken in this is actually what we explore in some of the kind of framework we built is the accountability that is actually the hardest isn't
Mm.
get your shit together. It's do you see the positive impact you have on others?
Mm.
And I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna show you how this person's life is better because of you, how this person's life is because of you. I'm thinking about like the Jimmy the Christmas, you know, the old black and white Christmas where he goes around and sees how what is that show?
Every year
Yeah,
crying
oh
my
yeah, it's my favorite. It's
yes,
my
it's a
favorite.
wonderful life.
Yeah, it's a wonderful life. And it's because that accountability, like the other accountability is what brought him to the bridge to jump off.
Mm, mm.
Because it's not seeing and holding them accountable to, and I would argue that that's what's happening in the group that allows you to be able to be comfortable in saying get your shit together, because what you're really saying is we know you've positively affected the community, we believe that you can positively affect the community, and we're going to support you so that you are able to positively affect this community in the way we know you can.
Yes, yes. Which is, I'll tell clients all the time, create a habit of uh, a, something in your calendar where you send a series of love notes to your friends,
Mm,
right? Where it's just a, I love that I get to love you in
mm,
this life, right?
yeah.
Because that is what you're talking about. You got to fill up that cup in order to
Mhm.
sometimes take a withdrawal from it.
Well, and I have, so the thing that started the thing I'm what we call connection curiosity and the finding good framework 5 years ago, and what I was doing even before I wrote the book is my friends and I, we've been doing this for 10 years now. There's three friends that live up in northern Idaho, actually. One that I played rugby with, another who was a former logger. So they're actually kind of not the personalities you would think about for this. But every week for 1 hour at 8 o'clock my time, so it's 7 o'clock their time. Anyway, 8 o'clock my time, we all get on the phone on a conference call. And for that hour, we can only talk about what went well in the prior week. And
Mm,
what that means isn't here's what I achieved and here's what I did. It actually means like, here's the thing that mattered to me. I spent 10 more minutes with my kid. I was able to like engage in this scary conversation with my spouse. I was, like, I could not even begin to count the amount of times that tears are on that call, right? And sometimes people show up on that call, what went well this week is I'm here on this call because
yeah,
maybe somebody I knew passed away last week, and it's the frequency of holding each other, sharing what's important with each other, and accepting that and understanding in that, and then holding that, that allows, like, from an accountability standpoint, like if we hear somebody's off, like I didn't join the call Wednesday, I got a phone call directly on Friday, like, hey, what's going on? Right. And so that's easy for us because the hard work of talking about what's important to us, we is literally scheduled, right?
mm,
And that there is very few places that I have a community that strong as with those other three. And we only see each other once a year.
wow, wow. But you're seeing each other.
Oh, every week, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
we and annoyingly I see them when I'm trying to make a decision, and like this little, son of a bitch. How am I going to explain this, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, um, and again, in our manosphere episode, sphere, I'm not saying fear, we talked about, what it means when you are a Black feminist and you say you have a wish for men. It's like,
Mhm.
you know, but I wish that for more men, that they had spaces like that, that they were going to, scheduling in, that was really that level of connection. I wish it because I have it on
Mhm.
multiple groups
Right.
that are multi-gender, and the men in my life who come into my groups, they are telling me they don't have it in other spaces that are just men.
Mhm.
I want to read one uh, final thing. I love this question that you had posed near the end of the book, where you said, where have you felt most alive? It was one of my favorite questions. Or tell me about a time when you were proud of yourself. Better yet, was there ever a time in your life you knew you were firing on all cylinders, bringing your best, or feeling as though what you were doing really mattered? These questions changed me as a coach. No longer did I have to feel like I had to solve everything, and clients responded differently when I wasn't telling them what to do. They may have been coming to me for answers, but deep down, they knew they had them the entire time. They were coming to me for permission. I love that. As we wrap up today, because Jay is messaging us in the background, because I'll go on for another 2 hours, somebody's listening today and they need your permission, that permission. What is the charge that you want to give to someone today?
Mm. Mm. Can you explain that more?
Yeah. Um, if there was one thing, one hope, one dream, one desire en masse for people out there who are struggling like Chris was, like you and
Mm.
I have, both in our personal lives and our own work, what was the permission you gave yourself, maybe?
Mm. I think it's in the writing itself that somebody needs your story.
Hmm.
And that may mean they need to hear it. That may mean you need to write it, but it also might mean that they need, right, your guidance that you got from that story, right? The perspective that you got from that story, or maybe they need for you to listen in a way that somebody else did to help you clarify that story. But at the core, like what cannot be argued, which and if you'd love to, I'd love to argue all day long because it's really easy to argue that there isn't a person in this world whose story isn't needed,
Hmm.
whose story couldn't make somebody better, whose experience could not add to the experience of others. And and if you know that about yourself, then you also know that whatever you need is in others' experiences as well.
Yes. Yes, you'll get no argument from
Mm.
from this person here. Of all the continents that I've lived across, all the study that I have done, my own personal reflection, I believe that we can make mistakes, but I don't believe that any one of us is a mistake. We were
Mm.
intended for this moment. Yes.
Yeah.
Brian Fretwell is the author of Experts of Our Potential, a story that will change how you deliver value. I cannot recommend this book enough. It's a quick weekend read with a lovely cup of tea, maybe some oat milk and like a little cinnamon topper. That's how I pick. Um, thank you so much for
Yeah. Thank you for
sharing
having
your
me.
story.
Yeah. No, thank you for having me and for engaging in the conversation. I really enjoyed it. Yeah.